Let's be friends.
Have you not?
Here we. Hi, everybody. Ambassador here. And as promised, well, I'm back. And today we're going to be discussing Superman 2025. And I know for some people this might be a bit of a hot take. For some people, it might be fairly straightforward and reasonable. But recently, I got a chance to go check out Superman 2025, directed by James Gunn, starring David Cornsweet, and so on. And I wanted to share my thoughts with you all. Now, a little bit of background on my personal history with the character of Superman and the various films and shows and so on that he's been in, and my thoughts on it. Most of you know I grew up reading comic books as a kid, as a teenager, and I was primarily a Marvel kid. I love my Marvel comics. I love my superheroes and all those things. But I did occasionally check out some of the DC superheroes, and of course, one of those was Superman. And I was there for the Death of Superman story arc and the return of Superman, the reign of the Supermen, and so on. I read some of the other adventures beyond that, and I grew up also watching Superman, the animated series, which was a big thing back in the day, back in the 90s. And of course, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And the various other anime films that featured Superman and at times Batman, like Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, Superman Doom, and so on. And I won't lie to you all. I liked the character of Superman. He was a cool character to me. He was an interesting character. I also grew up watching the Christopher Reeve Superman movies back when I was a kid as well. Primarily Superman 1 and Superman 2. The other two, I didn't particularly have any interest in, so I didn't watch them. But for a long time, Superman to me was how he was portrayed by Christopher Reeve and how he was portrayed in the animated films and the animated series and so on. And then 2013 came around and we got a new version of Superman by one Mr. Zack Snyder. And I went and saw Man of Steel back in the day. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you all. I did. And for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a interesting take on the character of Superman. It was something different. And it was received fairly well by most people. By other people, not so much. I was on the camp. I was somewhere in the middle where I didn't dislike it. I thought it was an ambitious take on Superman, but I could understand why other people did not particularly care for it. So, now that being said, did I check out BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League? Yeah, eventually I did. And for those of you that have followed the channel for a while, you all know that I had a fairly positive opinion of those two films. Were they perfect? No. But were they a attempt at doing something different with the character of Superman? Yes. Now, different doesn't always mean good, and it doesn't necessarily mean bad either. But I wasn't as hardcore a Zack Snyder fan as most people were, and that's okay. I mean, we vary in degrees of fandom depending on what we're interested in, and that for me is no different. So, but when things were starting to change at Warner Brothers and a new vision was being considered for the DC universe, a familiar name popped up, James Gunn. And I will be the first to admit, I like James Gunn as a director. I like his style of directing. Like his style of writing. I like how he portrays his characters, particularly with the Guardians of the Galaxy films from the MCU. I know he has done other projects over time, and I have checked those out as well. I did like his version of the Suicide Squad that came out in 2021, I believe. And when he was brought on as the new head of DC Studios, along with Peter Safran, I had cause to be excited. Here was a guy who knew his superheroes, who knew how to work in this universe, who wasn't just another studio head. This was a guy who loved superheroes, whether it was DC or Marvel. It didn't matter to him. And when it was announced that he was going to be doing this Superman movie that just came out a couple of weeks ago, I was like, okay, I will give this a shot because I like James Gunn. And the cast was announced. He had a new Superman, a relatively unknown actor by the name of David Cornsweet, and he looked the part. And but looking the part and being the part is two completely different things. And of course, we had Nicholas Hoult brought in as the new Lex Luthor. We had the early beginnings of the Justice League and Guy Gardner and Hawk Girl and Mr. Terrific. And I'll get into Mr. Terrific here shortly. But of course, we had a new Lois Lane, new Jimmy Olsen, new everybody. A new Eve Tessmacher, who was Lex Luthor's girlfriend. And this was not the first time that that character had appeared in Superman films, because there was an Eve Tessmacher or a Mrs. Tessmacher in the original Superman film, and I believe also in Superman 2. But this version was a bit different, and I will not. I will say that she was a breath of fresh air. She was quirky. She was silly. She didn't take herself overly seriously. She was trying to be a good girlfriend to Lex, but she understood that the guy that she was with, well, he had some issues. That's putting it very mildly. Lex Luthor, Lex Luthor in this version, and I'll get into my thoughts on Lex Luthor in this movie here shortly. But Nicholas Holt's portrayal of Superman's arch nemesis, Lex Luthor, it brought something different, but it also harkened back to something familiar. And that was something that I deeply appreciated. But getting into my thoughts on the film itself. We open with Superman in a seemingly very bad place. And he's at the Fortress of Solitude in Antarctica. And I will say this: the design for this Fortress of Solitude, I dug it. And I liked the inclusion of the Superman robots as well. And of course, Crypto. That scrappy, adorable, annoying at times Crypto. You gotta love that dog. And if you don't, what's wrong with you? How can you hate a dog? Seriously, how can you hate a dog? But through the course of the film, we see a new take on a familiar character. And do I believe that this movie played it a little bit too safe? No. Do I think it placed Superman in a position that is somewhat unfamiliar to his fans? Maybe, yes. Because this is a Superman that's been operating in Metropolis for a period of time that's longer than what we have seen before. And he's also in a relationship with Lois Lane, and this is a relationship where she knows that Clark Kent is in fact Superman. And it does present a different dynamic for their relationship than what we have seen previously. Because aside from a few of the animated features, particularly Superman versus the Elite, we've never been in a place where Lois knows that Clark is Superman. She knows the danger that he faces on a daily basis and so on. and she has genuine concern and care and love for him. Now, in this case, they've only been dating for a few months. This isn't a long term established relationship. But what I feel this brings is a sense of stability for the two of them, but particularly for Superman, because yes, he has his mother and father, he has Mom and Pa Kent, and I will say, I love the portrayal of Mom and Pa Kent in this movie. Granted, they only have a couple of scenes, but those scenes are impactful, and the first one that we see them in is very charming and funny because I've seen my own mother do with a smartphone what Ma Kent did with theirs. She had it sitting on the coffee table there in the living room, and she was talking to Clark, and she had him on speakerphone, but she was still shouting at the top of her lungs, even though she didn't need to. And I like that touch of humor because they understand this is a telephone, but they're still not fully comfortable with the idea of new technology. And they're not played off as simple country bumpkins or stupid or anything. It's just they don't want anything to happen to the phone, which I think a lot of us can take a cue from. Take care of your cell phones. They're not cheap. But the other aspect of this film that I appreciated was, and I will say this, I see this both as a net positive and a bit of a um, downside because we also have other superheroes in this film. We have the beginnings of the Justice League now, right now known as the Justice Gang, which I mentioned before with Guy Gardner and Mister Terrific and Hawk Girl, and of course eventually Metamorpho, who we meet in the Pocket Universe that Lex Luthor is keeping all of his political, well, I don't want to say his personal opponents and other metahumans and so on. And of course, we meet Metamorpho in the Pocket Universe, and where he's being um, controlled by Luthor to do his bidding because his infant son's being held hostage in that same Pocket Universe. And the Justice Gang, I have to admit, they're quirky, they're a bit off kilter, but I did enjoy them being in the film, particularly Mr. Terrific. Now, I'm not saying that Guy Gardner and Metamorpho and Hawk Girl didn't bring anything. They definitely did. I enjoyed them immensely in this film. I can't wait to see what else they are going to be in the future. But Mr. Terrific, this guy has the tech savvy and the swagger, a little bit of what I would consider would be reminiscent of Tony Stark from the MCU. Now, not full on Tony Stark because Mr. Terrific is his own unique character. Now, I will admit, I'm not super familiar with the character of Mr. Terrific, but what I saw in this film, I really enjoyed because this is a guy who's very smart, very savvy with technology, and technology is actually his what he brings to the table. He has his T spheres, which he can do all sorts of reconnaissance with and use in combat and so on. And I will say, I love the character design, the T-shaped mask that covers his face, the jacket, the leather jacket that says "terrific" on the back and has the words "fair play" on either arm. I love his entire design, and that's true for the other characters as well, including Superman. I will admit it. I did not dislike the metal inspired uniform or costume that Superman wore in Zack Snyder's films. I thought it was something different, particularly with Man of Steel. And I thought it really harkened to that title, The Man of Steel. But what we have here in Superman 2025 is a new take on what I think is somewhat of the classic Superman costume. I will say I think there is a little bit of design inspiration brought over from the uniforms of the Guardians of the Galaxy, particularly when they become a more formalized unit or group and everything. They actually have uniforms and everything, customized for each person that's a part of the group. But it's still Superman's costume, it's his uniform. And I think that was one of the things that was a very positive move on James Gunn's part and the design team's part. They wanted it to harken back to what people were familiar with um, Christopher Reeve's Superman, the other Superman um, projects that we've seen, including the comic books or anything. They wanted the they wanted the gold, they wanted the red, they wanted the blue, and then of course they wanted the blue trunks, and they wanted the cape with the insignia on the back on the cape itself. And it all really calls to the Superman of yesteryear, but brought into the modern era. And that's a big thing for me in this movie. This is a Superman who's wrestling with his place in the world. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do right by the legacy that he believes that his Kryptonian parents wanted him to carry on from Krypton. And I will get into the message and everything in the movie and everything and my thoughts on that here in a second. But what I also found interesting is the relationships that Superman has in this movie. Now, the most grounded and rooted, of course, is with his parents, his adoptive parents and everything, Ma, Jonathan, and Martha Kent. And what else I found was the relationship between Clark slash Superman and Lois. Because she herself says in the movie, I have never been really good with relationships. But she hasn't given up on him. And when his life is in danger, she's like, I still care. I want to make sure he's okay. And obviously he's not okay because he hasn't been in fact captured by Lex Luthor and put in this pocket universe that he created. And she goes out of her way to make sure that she puts her life on the line. And I think that is something that really speaks to the character arc of Lois in this film and what we will see probably going forward. Because at the conclusion of the main conflict, where they finally capture Lex Luthor, reveal all his scheming and everything, and what he's been trying to pull off in a very private moment between her and Clark, and everything slash Superman. He had told her previously that he loved her, and she reciprocated that. And everybody seems to have known that Lois was in a relationship with Superman, but they didn't seem to realize that she was also in a relationship with Clark. Now, another relationship in this movie that I really got a good chuckle out of was Jimmy Olsen and Clark there at the Daily Planet. And I will say, this new Jimmy Olsen, I like him quite a bit, and I can't wait to see what they do with him as well. Because this isn't the scrappy little snot-nosed reporter that's trying to come up through the ranks and everything. He has his own agency, and it's not fully developed, but it's getting there because he does also puts his neck out there to try and prove that Lex Luthor is dirty. He is corrupt, and he's trying to destroy Superman. And of course, he is in a semi relationship with Mrs. Tessmacher, who is at the time in a relationship with Lex. And she realizes that, and even Jimmy realizes that, we really can't be together because, my current boyfriend's kind of a lunatic. You want to talk about the crazy boyfriend? Well, you can't get much more dangerous than Lex Luthor. But Jimmy and Miss Tessmacher, they have a cute dynamic, and he comes to realize, yeah, I do kind of care about her, and yeah, I probably should do the right thing and see if we can make this thing work in the end. But Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. Now, for those of us who are familiar with comic book movies, we recognize this face, we recognize this name from the reboot X-Men movies of the early 2000s, particularly X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and, well, unfortunately, Dark Phoenix. But this is a different performance by Nicholas Hoult, obviously, different character, also, obviously. And what they did with Lex Luthor in this film, they combined two different aspects of his character from the comics and from other media. And this is the billionaire, and this is also the scientist. And I like that particular dynamic. Whereas in the past, we've had Lex Luthor as maybe the industrialist, the industrious billionaire, but not so much the scientist. But in this case, we get both. I will say it. I think that Nicholas Holt's portrayal is it's not as good as Gene Hackman's, because Gene Hackman will always be the one of the best Lex Luthors, aside from the animated version voiced by Clancy Brown. But this Lex Luthor, he was dangerous, he was maniacal, he was driven, and and Nicholas Holt's performance really brought that through. And that's something that you felt a sense of real danger with this Lex Luthor, unlike more previous, a recent portrayal that I thought at the time was something quite good, but I've come to realize, well, it was a big iceberg of badness. But my overall feeling walking out of this movie, I was like, this has the potential to go somewhere. Now, will the rest of the new DCU pan out as well as Superman 2025? Only time will tell. But do I feel this was a step in the right direction? Yes. Yes, I do. I would be lying to you all if I said I didn't feel it was a step in the right direction, because it was. I felt that the performances were well done. The script was, and the plot was well crafted. The villains, and I will touch briefly on Ultraman and the Engineer, these being Lex's hench people, they had a real sense of danger to them. These were not comedic villains. These were villains that were serious heavies, to use an old movie phrase. These were heavies that made you worry for the hero. Everything, and being working with Lex Luthor, this was a trio that brought a real sense of dread and danger to the film. But overall, if I were to score this, I would give this a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. And the main reason for my score is this: I would have liked a little more focus on Superman in this film, but I felt that the time that was diverted to the Justice Gang and Crypto and Lois Lane and so on added some world building and some character development, and showed the universe that Superman operates in and the people that he's going to be operating with in the future. So it's kind of a catch 22. I liked it, but at the same time, I would have liked maybe just a little more time focused on Superman himself. But aside from that, I have no big criticisms for this. I'm actually planning on going to see it again. And if the opportunity does not arise, then I'm definitely going to be getting it on home video when it comes out in the near future. But let me know down below in the comments if you've seen Superman 2025. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Did you think it was a step in the right direction, as I feel? Do you feel it was completely and utterly appalling? Let me know what you think. So, but as always, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and be on the lookout for more. I'm going to be recording and uploading some more videos and everything in the next few days and weeks. So, but I want to let y'all know I have missed you all. I have missed doing this, and I know it's a little bit of a different setup than you might be accustomed to. It certainly is for me, but I'm gonna do my best to bring you the best content that I know how to do. So, with all that being said, folks, you have a great day, and until next time, this is the Ambassador signing off.